Hey, so it's Kellie here. Kind of crazy curveball. Paul Scurrah, who led our series, who was the CEO of Virgin Australia, is no longer the CEO. It's been a crazy time for him, but in keeping with these crazy curveballs, we're going to do a second interview with him. So I'm just waiting right now for him to knock on my front door. We've rigged up a bit of a home studio so that we can have a chat about what's happened. Hello, come on in, Paul. Nice to see you.
Okay.
Come into this. No worries. I'm just hoping we beat the storm, actually, because the soundproofing does not beat that kind of Queensland thunderstorm.
No, exactly.
So a lot's happened in the short time since we recorded our first interview with you. You'd overseen the grounding of most of Virgin's aircraft. You'd gone through the administration process, the creditors' meetings. You'd worked through a deal to have Bain Capital buy Virgin Australia, and then devised a plan to rebuild the airline with reduced overheads. But now you're here in my spare bedroom, which is our makeshift studio today, and you're no longer the CEO of Virgin Australia. So, Paul Scurrah, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to taking some time off because the last 8-9 months has been incredibly taxing on me physically and mentally, and I haven't had much time off, and I think this provides that opportunity. And I wanted to make sure that the airline had a future, and I wanted to make sure it had a future where it was taking advantage of the situation it went through, and that the people there that we had fought so hard to save their jobs for had something to look forward to. And I'm proud to say that is the case, and I'm handing the airline over with a really good shot at success.
So what happened with you, though? You were closely working with Deloitte, who'd been appointed to manage the administration process and the deal with Bain, who are a Boston-based firm. And the last time we spoke, you were quite enthused about Bain's buyout of Virgin. Why are you sitting here today?
Well, I still am enthused about them buying it out. I think it was a great move. They were clearly the better buyer for the creditors, and they have promised to preserve 6,000 jobs. And I think that's a really good thing for the airline and a really good thing for the people of Virgin Australia. Personally, for me, I think in the last 18 months, I don't think I've had an easy day. So it has felt like 5 years. I am incredibly tired. And I know handing over to Jayne, who's well known to Bain, and she's well positioned to execute Bain's plans and expectations for the airline. So I'm good, and I'm cheering on from the sidelines and hoping that they have a really big, successful future.
So just on Jayne Hrdlicka, who is taking over, she was appointed to be an advisor for Bain Capital during the process. So was that strange to you?
Not at all. I think it's quite common where you have interested parties like we did. We had over 20 buyers run their eyes over buying Virgin Australia. Bain was one of those 20, but all of them employed industry experts to advise them about what they should be looking for, the things that were important to go through in the due diligence phase. So I wasn't at all surprised. Bain & Co. is where Jayne came from originally. She spent a lot of time not just as the CEO of Jetstar, but also within the Qantas executive team. So she knows the competition very well and knows the sector very well.
I mean, it's kind of a bit of a rough deal though, right? Because I think Bain Capital backed you publicly to stay on as the CEO. So was it surprising to you that a couple of months later you're no longer the CEO?
Nothing about this industry surprised me this year. Or for the whole time I've taken over. I can remember back to the very first week on the job, we saw the second Boeing MAX 8 accident occur at Ethiopian. We had an order book of 48 of them. And so we had to deal with that from the very first week of being there. And it just was a series of different curveballs thrown at me. for the whole time I was there. So nothing surprises me in this industry, and you should go into it expecting things like that to happen. It is an industry that is quite prone to turmoil. As we know right now, it's going through the biggest crisis that it has ever seen in the history of aviation. So nothing should surprise us.
They did back you knowing they were going into a staff vote and that you're quite a popular leader. They've also made a couple of promises about They made a promise not to strip the airline completely back and make it a low-cost kind of Jetstar equivalent, and to honour all employee entitlements, protect jobs. Do you think that's what will happen? Because I know the workers' unions are already sort of saying, oh, we're a bit worried that they're not going to come good on that promise.
Well, Deloitte made sure that when they were looking at the bidders that they had someone who would guarantee all workers' entitlements. And so there was a number of bidders that did that. So that is, I think, a high priority for Deloitte, and they made sure it happened. Bain have made no secret about the fact that that is the highest priority for them, and they will do it. There's no question about that. In terms of the product going forward, on my announcement, they reaffirmed what I'd been saying, which was they'd have a two-class cabin, they would have velocity as a key part of the business, and they'd have status would be the same, so there'd be tiering on the velocity program, and that they would have lounges around the country. So they've reaffirmed that recently.
Is it true that the remaining flight attendants and pilots will have to incur up to a 40% pay cut?
Well, that's still subject to the enterprise negotiations that are going on right now. So I think the unions were well aware that there was a need to change and to take some pain as well, and that is subject to those negotiations. So wherever it lands, and I'm not involved in those right now, wherever it lands is subject to those negotiations.
Was there any tension between you and Bain as a result of a slight, difference in understanding of what a low-cost airline looks like?
I know that's been well reported, but we were very aligned about the product.
In a press release, Bain Capital Managing Director Mike Murphy said the company needed a different form of leadership to survive long term. We need a hands-on CEO with deep aviation, commercial, operational and transformation experience. Jayne is the right person to take the business forward. That has got to hurt.
Not really. It doesn't. I think, one thing I've always learned in all of the jobs I've had is that the owners have the right to make these decisions. We mutually came to the agreement that I would leave, and I agree with him. Jayne is the right person to take on and deliver their plan and to deliver to the expectations they have as an investment. And quite often you see private equity will go to people they know, and people who they feel is a safe set of hands and aligned to their outcomes. And that is the reason why they have appointed Jayne. So it didn't hurt. I think I have a style about me that's succeeded for a long time. I have a long and strong connection with my workers. I don't think I'm a one-trick pony. I'm very good at restructuring and cost reduction, and I can do it in a way that actually brings the people on the journey with me. But I fully respect that decision.
And the other thing I want to clarify is what's happened to the board members of Virgin Australia.
So the original board that were there when I took over were a mixture of non-exec directors, very good quality ones, led by Elizabeth Bryan, and shareholder representative directors as well from the previous shareholders. So when Bain were awarded the bid, those directors, first of all, because it's been taken private, there's not an ASX-type board required anymore. Second of all, Bain gets to choose the board, as they should, as the new owner, and because they don't need a publicly listed type board, it can have a slightly different construct. And so they will choose the board members going forward, and mostly be made up of Bain executives. There may be, depending on where they land with the Virgin Group, there may be representation there, but that's a question you'd have to ask them at the time.
What do you think you've learnt from this, if you could reflect on just this crazy year and how it started and the middle of it and you trying to rescue the company and what's happened to you since? Like, what's top of mind for you?
I think it's anything can be achieved. I think, people talk about limiting beliefs and the impact they have on achievement. And I go into things with a very optimistic view, but not an overly optimistic view, a realistic optimistic view that says if we do these series of things, why shouldn't we be able to achieve this? And as unrealistic as it seemed at the time to rescue an airline that was in the middle of a pandemic, that got rescued and is still in a pandemic, had we have talked about that beforehand, you'd say it would be almost impossible to save it or survive. So I've learnt that anything is possible, and as a leader, you have to remain really calm and make sure that you keep explaining and communicating very frequently with everyone involved what the definition of success looks like. CEOs are required to do that in normal circumstances so that people know what journey they're on. But in this circumstance, the frame of reference of what success looks like changed completely, and it just became about survival only. So that was all we could see. All the effort went into survival, and we had to paint the picture to everyone that it was possible. And through doing that, through communicating really far and wide as much as you can, our theory was if you're communicating enough, you probably need to go 4 times that to really be communicating enough. And we did that, and we did it in spades, and it helped everyone come through. So, yeah, there's a lot of lessons in all of that. I think the other thing is, too, you can actually go through it and make really difficult decisions without actually taking away from focusing on treating people well. So as hard as it was to ask a lot of people, 4,500 people in the group, to leave the company through no fault of their own, meant that those tough decisions and taking their dream job off them didn't have to come with being callous or brutal. And we did it in a way where people who have left have all expressed their gratitude to the way they were handled, and that's something I'm particularly proud of.
You mentioned mindset there, and that limiting mindset or growth mindset, and it was something you touched on in our first interview, that way back when you were kind of a young pup coming up through the ranks, you could tell you were telling yourself, I can be the CEO one day. So I find this really fascinating that in the face of a global pandemic where flights are grounded the world over, you've gone into administration, you're working probably 18 hours a day, you haven't slept, you're not seeing the family. People are genuinely coming into your office, I'm sure, in tears, worried about their jobs. How do you hold on to that mindset that will not beat me and that will not beat the company and we will get through this?
Well, someone once said to me that success is about keeping your eye on the donut, not on the hole. So look at what is there and don't worry about what's not there. And there's plenty of other ways to say that. Worry about the things you can control, not those you can't. So we could not control the pandemic, but we could control our reaction to the pandemic. And another saying, we can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. For me, all of that time was about knowing clearly what success looked like, having a series of smaller steps that took us from today to success, and celebrate all of the small wins on the way that got us, so for example, we went from 10 long list of 10 to a short list of 4. We celebrated that. We went from a short list of 4 to a short list of 2. We celebrated that. When we introduced new flights back into the system after working with the government to get subsidies, we celebrated the re-entry. So we made sure that all along the way, we communicated the smaller steps that got us all the way to the end goal. And when we achieved them, we celebrated them. But we also acknowledged setbacks that happened then as well. But we always said this setback doesn't mean we can't get to the next step or the next step or the next step, and hence every one of those little steps gets us to be successful.
I want to press you even further on that because this is fascinating to me. What is in your head? Like, is there a voice in your head that's saying, "I'll be right, no worries," or is the voice going, "Holy shit, this is really hard, but as long as I keep calm in front of the staff, it'll be okay"? Like, I'm trying to get a sense of how ingrained it is in Paul Scurrah's psyche that we will get through this, or I can do this, or we won't be beaten.
I truly believe that I can't allow people to see me not in control in a sense of knowing where we're going. If I lose a bit of hope or they see that I'm not as on my game, I think that has a ripple effect through the organisation. So it doesn't become an act. It just becomes a mindset that says, I can't pretend to be in control. I have to be. I can't pretend to be optimistic. I sort of have to be. That's another curveball that's been thrown at us. So we have to find a different way. And I believe that if you put your mind to it, you always can find a different way. It's not always obvious at the time. Sometimes it might just come into my mind in a shower or going for a walk. At the most unusual time, like I might wake up with an idea and write it down next to on a piece of paper next to my bed. But I just don't think I can allow myself too much of that panic. And there were moments, though, where I sat down and go, right, I'm not sure what the answer is here. I have to have faith that it's going to come. But there were times where I was really stressed by what was being thrown at us. But I sort of did that in private and didn't allow it to show very often at all.
Because the job of a CEO, as well as to lead and be the calm, steering of the ship, captain sort of person, you are dealing with problems. Like things, only the bad things get to a CEO's desk, right? Your chief problem solver. I'm trying to get a sense of how much of a practice it is for you versus it's sort of innately in you.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It feels somewhat natural to me to handle it that way. And I'm sure at some point in the past it was more conscious than subconscious. But and in the earlier years, I did read incessantly about leadership and about some of the good and bad leaders in the world and the good and bad examples to follow or not to follow. But it has become more subconscious. But, I think it comes down also to making sure that you prepare really well. And I think I might have said previously that airlines prepare well for crisis and they rehearse it time and time and time again. So you need to be ready for whatever crisis comes your way. So preparation is the key to anything. So all of that reading, leading Queensland Rail through the floods when I did as CEO there, it all prepares you and it becomes a part of you, and all of it is an experience. None of it's been done perfectly, but when you get put in that situation, you call on that experience quite frequently. But it also comes down to making sure that part of your preparation for these things is in good times, or peacetime, as people say, that you build a really strong, capable team around you. And throughout the crisis, my team was superb. Absolutely superb. We stuck solid as a team. We knew who was playing what roles. There'd be times where you would throw a question in the room not knowing the answer, and one of them would come up with it or come up with a version of it that we worked together on to perfect. So the team that I had built, I'm super, super proud of them.
What's been the most surprising thing about the last 6 weeks for you?
The last 6 weeks, I think the most surprising thing has been just the ongoing resilience of the people in the business. I watched a group of people who, have every right to flop on the floor and say, I've had enough, and just throw their toys out of the cot, so to speak, and they didn't. They've focused on the end game, and it was incredible to watch a lot of people who hadn't been on the journey with us, who came into the building partway through or towards the end, would comment on just how positive the atmosphere was. They'd comment on how outcome-focused everyone was as well. So we were really pleased about that. And in the last 6 weeks, I think, given the stress we're all under, we had every right to be different. But we didn't allow that to happen. And I think I've learned that people can be a lot more resilient than they're given credit for.
And what would you say you've learnt most about yourself?
Similar answer to that, actually. The resilience, the sort of the fitness, mental fitness that I had was a surprise to me. I had to dig deep at times. I lost a lot of sleep, which is not the best way to prepare to be mentally sharp. And there were times where we just took on the task that was in front of us and I think made some really good decisions. We made mistakes along the way as well, clearly. But I think the mind is capable of a lot more than you give it credit for.
Can you tell me what it's like for a CEO to negotiate their exit from a company? Just give me a sense of what that's like, because not many people would have gone through that.
I don't really think about it outside of it being another negotiation. I know it's me, but it is one of those ones where I go into it the same way I would for on behalf of any other employee, and that is make sure that both parties feel as if they've gotten what they want out of it, a compromise position, and make sure that both parties are respectful of each other and make sure that the people on both sides are treated well. So I depersonalise it a little bit and make sure that that those principles apply.
And can you do that? Can you depersonalise it when you're the person who's stepping away from the organisation, especially when it's happened so quickly amid a lot of hard work for you? Is there, something that you reflect back on in terms of that negotiation that you would do differently? Or, I'm sure you've never had to do that before, have you?
Not that I can recall. I can't recall. But look, having said that, I just don't think allowing either party to get emotional is helpful to the outcome. And we did have the discussion around mutually whether we wanted to go forward or not, and it was a joint decision.
Is there a part of you that is relieved that you don't have to lead an airline through what I'm sure is going to be another 24, 48 months of horror?
Not really. I would really relish that challenge. It's really weird to say. I wouldn't change a day. And having led this amazing group of people through some really tough times, part of me would love to have been there to lead them through the rest. But I'm also going to be the biggest fan. I am going to do a bit of travel, and I'm going to fly on Virgin, and I'm going to say thank you in person to as many people as I can, because they have been superb through this, and if there's one thing I will miss, it's the people.
What's next for you?
A rest. I don't know career-wise what is next for me, and I really don't want to spend too much time obsessing about that. We're coming up to Christmas. I want to do a bit of travel. I would normally be heading over to Canada to do some skiing, and unfortunately that's a very difficult thing to do. Maybe not impossible, I'm learning, but I don't really want to think what is next for me. I've had some interest already to do some things that are not necessarily full-time executive positions, which are of interest, but I've actually made a promise to myself that I'm not going to say yes to anything until the new year. That's
hard though, right? Because your psychology, certainly mine would be, I've got to quickly get something else because, I can't be sitting on the couch for too long. It's a tough job market. There's only so many CEO roles out there. So can you steel yourself up for a couple of months watching Netflix and driving around regional Queensland?
I think so. But look, I'm really keen to help Bain if they need it. And I'm available for them and I'm an advisor to them until early in the new year. And so if they need me, I'm there to help them. And, I just wish them all the very best. And I wish Jayne all the very best. And they have a really bright future. And I think my immediate focus will be in cheering them along to make sure they succeed.
Paul Scurrah, thank you for the update. And if you're listening to this bonus episode of Curveball right now and you haven't heard the first episode with Paul Scurrah, do go back and listen to it. Lots of insights on his career, not just with Virgin Australia, but also with Queensland Rail and Qantas and even Ansett. And a little bit about the professional footy career that almost was for him as well. And in the next episode of Curveball, you'll meet one of the most interesting leaders I've interviewed, Carolyn Creswell of Carmen's. She's built her company up from the initial $1,000 she bought it for to a multi-million-dollar empire. But she's also dealt with some whopping challenges, including quite a shocking health issue for her son. So make sure you're subscribed to Curveball so you don't miss it. Curveball's a production of Dead Set Studios. I'm Kellie Riordan.